The following is a JourneyWise Network production.
Hey friends, welcome to JourneyWise Podcast. I'm Shane Stanford.
I'm Ronnie Kent.
I'm James Kent.
And we are so glad that you've joined us for what will certainly be an earth-shattering podcast today, because we are taking on a topic that literally none of us know anything about. That's why we wanted to do this. And that is, as the new year has started, a lot of folks want to set up these resolutions. We talked about that a few weeks ago. But what happens when you decide that you want to be more organized and you know that you clearly just do not have that gift? And so, Ronnie, James, and I are going to turn this over to you and just ask you to take that on. No. Before we do that, I think each of us needs to make a statement here. I am, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm about a 4 in terms of, so I want to be organized. I have some qualities where I am, but I give up on those qualities pretty quickly. What about you?
2 to 3. 2 to 3. In fact, I could have made a good bit more money in my career if I had not had to hire people to keep me organized. And so that was my way of dealing with it, was to spend money.
Okay, well, good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
James?
Or negative numbers? No, I think just like the two of you, there are areas where I would say I do quite well. I can confirm 100% it's not an area that I succeed in or thrive in. But beyond my own self, my organization tends to fall off. If I get overloaded, which happens easily, I tend to start to struggle pretty quickly.
So before we kind of move into the generic conversation of how to hopefully help our listeners do better in this, is there any particular issue for any of the three of us that tends to trip us up quicker? Is there any type of organization that you find the most difficult?
I have decision paralysis.
Huh.
I mean, you can ask James.
I can confirm.
Just moved in, a new shop and had everything just there. And then I would just stand, I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, but I would just stand and look around. But my oldest daughter, who's, we've got all the ladies. Is this a trend? All the ladies in my family seem to be pretty organized. But if she had not stepped in and said, Dad, I'm coming next Wednesday, we're going to start. Once I got started, you can ask James, once I got started, I was pretty good. But I think decision paralysis is a big part for those of us who struggle with organization.
What about you?
I would say yes. There are situations that trip me up, but also, I mean, I was diagnosed with ADHD as a kid, and organization it's interesting. In some ways, I might be one of the more organized people that you would see, but it's typically an area that comes very natural to me, or I'm very interested in, and in something that I don't have much interest, or those I'm supposed to type things. It could be an absolute nightmare. And I'm pretty decisive. Maybe get some of the flip of what Dad's talking about. I sometimes have a hard time seeing the trees. The forest comes easier. But the details of how do I just get started, move forward, what's the first thing I need to do, that certainly can trip me up. But I can see where I need to get. It's just, how do I get there? What steps do I take, and how to organize it can be a little harder.
So what are the results of disorganization in your life? I know for me, it usually causes my relationships to grow more and more tense because I can live with a much higher grade of disorganization than most people around me. What about you guys?
Yeah. Well, and this may be moving into the next thing we're going to talk about, but because obviously our wives are the ones that bear the brunt of this more than anybody. Professionally, here again, I can take care of that. Literally, it's hard to hire another wife. It kind of is not well accepted in my house.
Probably not.
Not that we've tried it, but anyway. But what we came to do is there was in our old house in particular, we have not really instituted as much, but there was always a sticky note at one particular place with my task. And that sounds kind of like she's bossing me around, but it really worked real well for us. And I would mark that task off, and I'd get down to the last. I'd be so excited to get down to the last thing to mark off, and I'd look, and there was another sticky note underneath it. So I think if you are intentional about working with those close around you, I think you can learn how to manage. But if you don't care how they respond, I think that's not the right attitude to have toward it.
And so it's not that it's about you do care.
Oh, absolutely.
But does your range of disorganization, is it much larger than, say, Ann, your wife's?
Oh yeah,
by far.
She's touch OCD about some things, don't you think? I mean, she gets real, like
James is looking
feel
like,
I shouldn't answer
please
that
don't
question.
make me verify anything.
I don't consider OCD unless it gets in the way. But when she wants something done, it's pretty much. I mean, I think if you want to look at your personalities or who you are, she's to me that simplified melancholy type thing who's very task oriented. And task-oriented people tend to be more organized.
She's a bit more rigid, maybe she just has a methodical way.
And that has worked beautifully in our marriage once I got used to it. Now, because I'm more of a people-oriented, so people come, and I'm not saying she's not people-oriented, I'm not task-oriented, but people, kind of get in the way of her tasks sometimes. And so we work together, and like I say, once you appreciate that she's trying to sharpen you, then I think the sparks, iron sharpens iron, sometimes sparks fly.
Set things on fire, yeah.
And so I think that once you learn to deal with those people around you, that they're there for your good, it's much easier.
What about you in terms of your range of disorganization? You and Jessica, do you have different ranges of disorganization, of how you're comfortable with it or uncomfortable with it?
Well, I think I feel like I should say this. One of the biggest things I've learned, and it feels so obvious to say out loud now, but I've struggled for so long, and school was quite difficult. The idea of remembering an assignment later in the week, or having an assignment due and forgetting about this other assignment due for another class, that really was difficult. And then as I got to higher levels of education, the class may meet only once a week, where it's stretching you out even farther.
Yeah.
And so over time, what I realized was I avoided trying to be more organized because it stressed me out.
Sure.
But then I realized, well, by not being organized, that stresses me out more.
Okay.
Because of the consequences of, I'll never forget when I was in my undergraduate, I walked into a class one time. It was a drafting class. It was my freshman year, and we had a test, and I didn't know. And I was like, and I didn't know how to draft. I mean, this was just an introduction to it. So somehow I made a high C on that test, just letting everybody know. But I realized over time that all my efforts to avoid trying to be organized because it was stressful to me, they actually were not helping. They were hurting, because not being organized, it was a greater detriment to me. As far as Jessica and I go, I would say that I share some tendencies with my mother. That's why I'm hesitant to call her out. I certainly appreciate a more rigid and methodical approach because it helps me know what to expect. I'm also not great at remembering where things go or where they are. So Jessica, my wife, gets upset with me because I would love to have endless counter space because we wouldn't put anything in the cabinets. That way I could see it and I would know where it is.
Sure.
So we're just different. She organizes things. She's much tidier. She is better at remembering what's coming up. One of the things I really struggle with is the down the road things. Dates are hard for me. But I'm all in. If I'm doing it that day or I'm engaged in it, I'm all there, where she's someone who's more easily distracted thinking about what is coming up or what just happened and things like that. So we're different, but I think we we help each other.
Are there certain practices that help you become more organized, or that if you sort of exist within those models that you are more organized? And why don't you practice those more if they do exist?
Well, doing things immediately,
Mm-hmm.
the Ohio, only handle it once.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I put something in, and you know, I, I used to be, and I'm still pretty bad about it, but I used to be a stacker.
Mm.
You know, have a stack that I needed to do right now. And so then that would get pretty big, and I'd move it to start my next stack of things that I was going to do right now. And of course, after 4 or 5 times, you have stacks that, you know, never going to get done. So
At some point, it's called hoarding.
Sure, sure.
well, we don't, for some reason, I don't like that word. But anyway.
Or Jenga, that's
right.
life Jenga.
Right.
So me trying to do it immediately really does help.
Okay.
And then the other thing is electronics now, I think, are a disorganized person's friend. I mean, you know, if somebody says, "Can you do something?" I pick my phone up and, you know, I would say the name, but it would turn my phone on right now and say, "Remind me," or "I need to." So I use that a lot.
And so talk about that technology becoming a help. Is there something you would recommend to someone who's going, I've got to get more organized? Is there any particular type of technology that is better than other suggestions?
I mean, it probably sounds ridiculous, but a.k.a.
Mm-hmm.
for me, that was pretty revolutionary. Again, when I was going through graduate school, I made the decision because I was struggling so much with keeping up with everything. One semester, I just decided when I get all my syllabus, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to go through the entire list of assignments, and I'm going to enter them in to my calendar. And I had class that was color coded by class and had alerts set, and that helped tremendously. I mean, I think things as simple as just a timer, losing track of time, an alarm, and certainly there are apps that go well beyond what a calendar is capable of. I think one of the things that I would, you know, when I would meet with patients and we would be trying to help them with organization, kind of the blind leading the blind, but I do know that many of them benefited from technology, whether it was an app or just learning how to use your digital secretary on your iPhone. It really benefits them. The other thing that I would try to help them recognize is if you'll use that to be more organized, you can also use it to know when you don't have to pay attention to it.
Sure.
And so even creating, and that's good boundaries, just creating space where you don't have to say have your phone with you if you don't want to have it. But if you'll plan for that, you know, it helps.
We have been talking about our 360-day devotional series, Life Along the Way, for a while now. The first book, Jesus With Us, came out last fall, and now book 2, Jesus Among Us, is released on January 16th and is available in bookstores, on Amazon, and Shop the Word.
The launch of this series has been so exciting for us at JourneyWise. We have watched how just a few minutes a day reading through the Gospels, following the life of Jesus, has been a game changer for everyone who has started this journey with Jesus. Individuals, small Bible study groups, and even entire church congregations have responded with reviews of how they are learning so much more about Jesus and his ministry.
And the number one thing we are hearing from the churches whose congregations have been on the journey together is unity. When you know that the person sitting next to you on Sunday morning has been reading and studying the same verses of Scripture that week, there is a sense of connection, of community, that we sometimes miss if we aren't in the same small groups.
Folks, if you're not already started the Life Along the Way journey, I want to encourage you to go to our website, JourneyWise.network, and click the link to order your copy of Jesus With Us, and now Jesus Among Us today, to start your journey with Jesus.
What do you think is the psychology behind misorganization or being unorganized is? What's going on there?
Wow, I'm not really know if
Some
I've
of it's
ever...
personality. So some of it is driven by what we consider to be important.
Right.
Sure.
For example, you generally people fall into two categories: more task oriented, more relationally oriented.
Okay, that's good.
And I
I'm a
think
more
that's what I was gonna
relationally
say.
oriented person.
We all three, I think, are more
Yeah,
relational.
more
That's why I think we
relational.
struggle.
I am much more likely to sacrifice a task to attend to a relationship
Sure.
or prioritize something that is relational, which drives my wife insane, understandably, because she's a task-oriented person. Now,
Sure.
she is extremely loving and nurturing and relational. That's not what I'm saying. But she, in her mind, getting things done is a priority. And sometimes it comes before, hey, come sit and talk with me. She's like, I don't have time for that right now. Which,
is she a list checker?
oh
Does she
yeah,
like
oh yeah,
mark those boxes off?
she does. She used to try to make me lists. That did not go well for either of us. Just we've grown from that. However,
we need to ask the audience to calm down for just a little bit. So
yeah, I just lost my place. I don't know.
well, because
So, task relationship, yeah.
because and that doesn't mean that I think somebody could live in the middle of both of those and do pretty well, right? Somebody who
100%.
Yes.
What my job is to do, I didn't say that correctly. What my job needs to be is know I'm relationally oriented, so I need to grow in my ability to focus on tasks. Like that's a choice.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I have to change. It just means I know where my habit formation. I definitely need to counteract that in some way by working on those task-oriented habits.
And I think it's something that us guys in particular don't like to do. We need to ask for help. When you are not an organized person, it really is beneficial for you to say, I'm sorry, I don't mean to frustrate you, because it does. It frustrates those people around you that you forget. We forgot the birthday party. I mean, both of us, my wife never forgets anything, but she did it anyway. But to ask for help when you realize that not make it their responsibility,
Sure.
but say, could you help me in this area?
So why do you think people do forget, or why do you think people, I mean, other than getting busy, as we talked about just a few minutes ago, but I don't think intentionality is a fine line you have to be clear about.
Right.
Because if someone's being intentionally unorganized or intentionally don't care, that's different than someone who maybe can be shaped or worked with a little bit. I mean, I know relationships suffer greatly because of this issue at times, but can also be they can benefit from this continued effort, right? Because there's an intentionality with the relationship. Help me do better with this.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons. So I think some of what you're asking about is the science of attention.
Yes.
What do we attend to, and why do we attend to it? And there are a lot of that's multifactorial for sure. But the busier your life is, the harder it is to be in, to attune to anything. So the more likely you're going to struggle to be organized or remember. Certainly, different personalities will prioritize different things. So what's important to you again will cause your attention to be more so on one thing than something else. I mentioned ADHD earlier. Well known to cause more more likely to have a struggle with remembering things, long-term memory, and that's because it tends to affect working memory, which is the brief window in which your brain has to choose to do something with the information at hand. And that's milliseconds to very few seconds. I mean, it's very quickly happening all the time. So hard to answer with just one thing. There's many things, but it's easy to say what's important, what someone considers priority, and also just your personality, your brain chemistry. These types of things matter as well.
So, are there any? I'm not municipal. That's not the way I'm looking at it. Is there anything that is prophylactic that you can do to help with bad organization?
Well, I think that here again, planning to be organized and not just taking it for granted.
Yeah.
Just not saying, well, I hope, bad word, I hope that I can remember that. If you know you struggle with that, do something about it. Go ahead and get an app or speak into the phone or have a notepad. I mean, you know, I do multiple things. I have sticky notes. I have a notebook that I carry with me when I don't want to carry an electronic device, and I have an electronic device that I can immediately do. So prophylactically, you prepare yourself for disorganization.
Sure.
You know, and don't just say, well, I'm going to do better. Probably not. Unless you put something into place, you're probably not going to just improve. Now, as you're a child, you might, but as an adult, I think you have to do something ahead of time.
Sure.
To keep yourself from being disorganized.
What do you think, James?
Absolutely. I think the answer is yes, there are things that you can do. I'd say one thing just to point out, and we you know, it's amazing how often this comes up, but there's a reason it comes up so often. For me, I know I had a lot of shame associated with my faults, the areas that I struggled in, and this has been one for me that has been significant for a long time. I think especially when you're worse at it than your peers, and that's where kind of my ADHD came in. A lot of adults look at you like you're not trying, or that you don't care. So because the expectation is, given your age and the ability of your peers, you should be able to blank. Remember to wear shoes to school, for example. But when you have someone who struggles with something like ADHD, it's not an excuse. Don't hear me say that, but it is present.
Yeah.
And you know what? That kid who didn't wear the shoes, it doesn't bother them at all that they're at school with no shoes on. It bothers the adults around them.
Sure.
So when I got old enough to realize, you know what? And some of it because of the ADHD and even my dyslexia, I'm actually better at some things than all these people. It really helped me counteract the shame that I would experience about not being good at things. So I would say prophylactically, if you can remember that you're going to be bad at things, some of you may be worse at them than most people. However, there's always a flip side to every coin. And you need to focus on what you're good at and not focus so much on feeling bad about what you're not so good at.
So, so the permission giving in that sense has to begin with you first.
Yes.
You can't seek that out other places.
I would say it does have to begin with you first, but I would challenge adults around smaller kids. That's a tall order for a kid to have that level of self-agency.
Yeah.
Adults around them really need to encourage them when they complain or are upset, or so-and-so told me I was, you know, bad at this or that, or my teacher's angry. That's when you say, I remember there's a story with my oldest boy. He was sitting on the driveway with his older cousin, and he was in second grade at the time. And he asked his older cousin to write a word in sidewalk chalk. And she said, well, you're in second grade. Can't you write that? And he said, no, I have dyslexia. And she said, what's dyslexia? And he said, well, it's kind of like a superpower, but you can't read that great, or you can't write that great, excuse me. And that was what I had told him, that this will be a superpower for you in many ways, but you'll have to fight for that to be your identity, essentially. So I would say that as an adult, or even a teen or early adult, have some self-agency, but for all those kids, you know, they need some adults to help them with that.
All right. Anything else we want to share with our folks? I mean, I think this is about 1 in 2. I think people tend to struggle with this at some level, if not everybody struggles at some level. But I do think a lot of it has to do with how we are viewing our organization or lack of thereof in terms of relationship. I think it's the impact on relationship, first of all. But secondly, we do live in a world where you're not going to get everything right, and you're not going to make sure everything's taken care of. And so what would you say to that person?
It's all about relationships.
Okay.
Every answer is going to ultimately, for me, come down to that. And I think it can be a relationship breaker or a relationship enhancer. And so I think, like James is saying, we need to focus on what we can do to help each other. I mean, organization is just one thing. Other people the other group may struggle with people skills and feel bad about themselves that they don't have the people skills they would like. So we walk together, and in particular in marriage, it's amazing how many people I talk to that they're pretty opposite to their spouse.
Yeah.
And God, that wasn't an accident,
Yeah.
And it's that when He created Eve, it was a equal opposite, and that's what that word means, a helpmaker suitable for you. And so I think we celebrate what our weaknesses and our strengths do for our relationships.
I know in my marriage and in a lot of marriages, I think if they could view it like what you were just a helpmate opposite, a completion instead of that person having to be the same likes, same interests, the same quality.
How boring.
I mean, well, yes, and that also is limiting when you think about what it means for the rest of your journey.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well,
it's
thank
exciting.
you. Yeah,
exciting.
Thank you very much. Hey guys, it's Shane. We're so excited that you're on this journey, and we want to thank you for joining us. If you like what you hear, it would mean a lot if you'd subscribe to the podcast and give us a 5-star rating and review. And of course, stay tuned to all that God's doing and working to make all of us JourneyWise.